Victor Evans hadn't worn a tie in 5 years, but as he knotted the worn navy fabric around his collar in the cracked mirror of the gas station restroom, he whispered to his reflection, "You're gonna get this job." For Zayla, outside, his 6-year-old daughter waited in the back seat of their dusty Corolla, her sketchbook in her lap, her pink backpack tucked beneath her legs. The air conditioner had stopped working 2 summers ago, but she never complained. She just smiled, like her late mother used to, and said, "We're tough, Daddy." The downtown office building gleamed like it had never known a struggle. Victor stepped into the lobby, holding his resume a single printed page creased from being folded too many times. The job posting had been vague, personal assistant needed. Full-time, high discretion required. He didn't know what high discretion meant, but he figured if it paid enough to cover rent and Zayla's school lunches, he'd figure out the rest later. He gave his name to the woman at the front desk, who glanced up with barely a flicker of interest. "Take the elevator to the top floor. Miss Fallon will meet you there." The elevator doors closed behind him, and his stomach twisted. He'd applied to over 30 jobs in the last month. Most hadn't even responded. This one had emailed back within an hour and asked him to come in the next morning. No phone call, no background check, just an address and a time. When the elevator opened, he stepped into a minimalist, glass-walled office that overlooked the entire city. The air smelled like lavender and money. "Mr. Evans." The voice was smooth, low, and female. He turned and froze. Standing behind a sleek white desk was a woman in a tailored cream suit and heels that probably cost more than his car. Her dark brown hair was twisted into a low bun, her features sharp and elegant, but there was something else her eyes. They widened when they met his, like she'd seen a ghost. "Yeah," he said, clearing his throat. "That's me, Victor Evans." She stepped around the desk, extending her hand. "Fiona Vale." He shook it, trying not to notice how warm her skin was. Her grip was firm, confident. "I read your resume," she said, gesturing for him to sit across from her on a leather chair. "I have to be honest. You're not exactly what I was looking for." "Trust me," Victor said with a tired grin. "You're not what I expected either," her lips twitched. "Fair enough." They sat. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You were a contractor." "Yeah, carpentry mostly. I had my own business before." Before things got complicated. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. "And now, I just need steady work. I've got a kid. Her name's Zayla. She's 6. He hesitated. "Her mom passed a few years ago." Fiona's expression softened just slightly. "I'm sorry," he nodded. "Thanks." She tapped a pen against the edge of her desk. "Victor, I need someone I can trust, someone who can handle a lot of pressure, who won't ask too many questions. Discretion matters in my line of work." He raised an eyebrow. "What exactly is your line of work?" She hesitated. "I manage several investment firms, and I help run a few nonprofits. My schedule's insane. I need someone who can handle errands, organize my calendar, drive me to meetings, pick up things last minute. It's not glamorous." "I don't need glamorous," he said. "I need reliable." She studied him again. "Do you have a suit?" "I have this tie," he said flatly. Something flickered in her eyes again, like amusement. "And something else." She stood. "You start Monday." Victor blinked. "Wait, seriously, you said you're reliable." "Let's find out." He stood too, trying not to look shocked. "Thank you, I won't let you down." She nodded, then added, "Bring your daughter with you. I'll have my driver take her to a nearby day program I fund. It's safe, creative, and she'll love it." He stared. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, stunned. Fiona watched him as he left, her heart pounding. She hadn't seen him in almost 10 years, not since that night in college when he'd held her hand under the bleachers. They weren't close, not exactly, but he was the only boy who'd ever made her feel seen. Then he dropped out, vanished. She'd looked for him once after her first company went public and she had the power to find anyone, but she didn't. Now here he was. Broke, exhausted, and still somehow the most grounded man she'd ever met, and he hadn't recognized her. Good. She wanted it that way. For now, on Monday morning, she watched from her office window as Victor stepped out of a cab with Zayla. The girl clung to his hand, her curly hair bouncing in a ponytail, her eyes wide as she looked up at the giant building. Fiona's driver greeted them with a smile and crouched to speak with Zayla before leading her gently into the black SUV. Victor watched them go, anxiety written all over his face. Then he turned and headed inside. By the time he reached her office, Fiona had already set a coffee on his desk, black, 2 sugars, just like he'd mentioned in passing during the interview. He paused, surprised. "You remembered that," she shrugged. "I remember a lot of things." He gave her a look. "You're full of surprises. You have no idea." That first week, he proved himself fast. He was on time, asked smart questions, remembered names. He stayed late when she needed him to. He even carried a spare set of flats in his bag after her heels broke during a meeting. But Fiona's heart tightened each time he smiled. He had no idea she was a millionaire worth well over $50 million from her tech startup that exploded 3 years ago. And he had no idea she'd been in love with him once. Maybe still was. She watched him laugh with Zayla in the lobby one afternoon, the girl clinging to his leg as he tried to walk. His eyes sparkled with joy. He looked up and caught Fiona watching. She quickly looked away, but not before he smiled at her, and something in her chest cracked open. "You fixed my espresso machine." Victor wiped his hands on a cloth and straightened from where he knelt beside the chrome appliance in Fiona's private break room. It wasn't broken. The steam wand was just clogged, probably milk residue buildup. Fiona blinked. "I had 2 techs come look at it. Neither of them figured that out. They were probably looking for something complicated." He stood and stepped back, nodding toward it. "Try it now." She pressed a button, and the machine hissed to life, releasing a steady stream of hot espresso into the porcelain cup. She glanced over her shoulder at him. "You sure you weren't an engineer in a past life? I like figuring things out, especially when it saves $200. Fiona stirred the espresso slowly, the scent curling around her. "You know, I've had that machine for 3 years and not once has it made a cup this smooth." Victor leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Well, congratulations, you're officially caffeinated." She turned toward him. "Tell me something, Victor. If you could do anything at all, what would it be?" He hesitated, caught off guard. "You mean like dream job?" "Yeah." He let out a breath, gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. "I used to want to design furniture, real stuff. Not IKEA instructions and flat pack boxes. I had plans for a studio once, even drew up blueprints for it." "What happened?" He looked at her then, and there was something quiet and solid in his voice. Life happened." Fiona didn't press. She just nodded and took another sip of espresso. "You ever think about picking it up again?" He gave a brief shake of his head. "Right now, all I think about is keeping things steady for Zayla. Dreaming takes energy I'd rather give to her." Fiona set the cup down. "I have a friend who runs a local gallery. They host artisan showcases every few months if you ever want to display something." "I don't have anything left to show." "Then make something." He raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a workshop too?" "I'm offering you a chance. Whether you take it or not's up to you." He stared at her for a long moment. "You always make offers like that to your assistants?" "No," she said quietly. "Just the ones who fix espresso machines without asking." Later that evening, Fiona watched from the backseat of the car as they drove past a mural painted across the side of a brick building. It was a riot of color, wild brushstrokes, and golden light. Victor's words echoed in her head. Dreaming takes energy. She knew what it meant to let go of dreams. She'd sacrificed more than one to get where she was now, but she had resources, power, options. Victor didn't. The next morning, she left a package on his desk without a note. Inside was a custom leather sketchbook, the kind used by serious designers, and a small tin of charcoal pencils. When he found it, he looked around the office, puzzled. "Did you leave this?" he asked when she walked in. She didn't look up from her phone. "Maybe." He opened the sketchbook, flipping through the blank pages. "This probably cost more than my first car." "Well, consider it a professional expense." He set the tin beside it. "For what profession? You tell me." That afternoon, while she reviewed reports in her office, she saw him in the lobby with Zayla again. He was kneeling beside her, tying her sparkly sneaker with careful fingers. She was talking animatedly, waving her hands as she described something. He listened, nodding like she was the most important person in the world. Fiona felt her chest go tight. Something tender and unfamiliar curled in her stomach. The next day, he arrived exactly on time, but his shirt had paint smudges along the cuffs, faint but visible. You painting something? She asked. He looked down, sheepish. Zayla and I started this mural on her wall. She wanted a jungle. There's a giraffe with a crown and a sloth doing ballet. That sounds ambitious. She insisted the sloth needed a tutu. Fiona smiled but didn't say more. She liked that he didn't apologize for it. That afternoon, she took a call with the board of one of her foundations. As she spoke, her eyes drifted to Victor in the outer office. He was organizing files but paused to glance at the sketchbook she'd given him. He opened it and started to draw, his brow furrowing in concentration. When the call ended, she walked out. "What are you working on?" He looked up, startled. "It's nothing." She stepped closer. "May I see?" He hesitated, then turned the sketchbook toward her. It was a chair, sleek, elegant, with carved curves and intricate joints, a design that demanded both creativity and knowledge of structure. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "I used to imagine building furniture that people would pass down, not just use and toss. Something that lasts." She ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the page. "So build it. I don't have tools or the space or time." "What if I said I could give you all three?" He frowned. "Why would you do that?" "Because there's more to life than just surviving, Victor." He looked at her for a long beat. "You say that like you've never had to." Fiona didn't respond. She just met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. That night, she asked her assistant to call her contractor. "Find me a space on the east side, quiet, something with natural light. I want it by next week." The assistant blinked. "What kind of space?" "Workshop, for wood, tools, design. And make sure it's walking distance from the school on 10th. "Who's moving in?" Fiona looked out the window, her voice soft. "Someone who needs a place to dream again." By the end of the week, Victor showed up with a rough wooden carving in his hand. It was small, no more than 6 inches tall, a giraffe with a crown. "I figured you might need a mascot for your desk," he said. Fiona stared at it. "Is this from the mural?" He nodded. "Zayla said the giraffe was brave. Thought you might like that." She reached for it, and for a moment their fingers touched. Something shifted. Neither of them said anything, but everything had changed. Victor didn't know how long he stood staring at the keys in his hand. Fiona hadn't just found him a space, she'd leased a full studio on the corner of Maple and Knox, with high ceilings, wide windows, and a row of untouched equipment gleaming in the back. The rent had already been paid for 6 months. He'd tried to argue with her in the car when she handed him the small envelope, but she just said, "I don't loan dreams. I invest in them." Now, standing in the middle of the quiet studio while sunlight spilled across the concrete floor, he felt the strange weight of possibility pressing into his chest. He thought about Zayla's mural, half finished, the giraffe now carved in miniature on Fiona's desk. He thought about the sketchbook she'd given him, and the way her eyes lingered on his hands when he drew. He didn't understand her. He didn't understand why someone like her, polished and powerful and living in the kind of world that chewed people like him up and forgot their names, would do any of this. But he wanted to. The next morning, he brought her a coffee she hadn't asked for. Not from the office machine, but from a place 2 blocks away that served espresso with a hint of cinnamon. She took one sip and raised an eyebrow. "You remembered. You said once you liked cinnamon, but only when it wasn't trying too hard." Her look was unreadable. "That was months ago. I guess I listen." She set the coffee down slowly. "That's dangerous." He leaned against the doorframe. "You keep saying things like that, like I'm supposed to be afraid of you. You should be." "I'm not." She stood then, crossing the room. "You don't know who I really am. You think I care about your bank account. Most people do." Her voice was quiet but sharp. "I'm not most people." She stopped in front of him, and for a second there was no air between them. "I know who you are," he said, his voice low. "You show up when you don't have to. You remember things no one else would. You pretend you're hardened, but you're the one sending little girls to art programs and stocking someone's dream studio without blinking." She didn't move. "You think that's who I am?" "I know it is." Her hand brushed his sleeve, barely a touch. "Victor, if I let this happen..." "What? I won't be able to go back." He met her eyes. "Then don't." For a beat, neither of them moved. Then, abruptly, she turned and walked away. That night, Fiona stood alone on her penthouse balcony, lights from the city blinking below her like stars that had fallen and forgotten how to rise. She wanted to call her sister, but she wouldn't understand. No one in Fiona's world would, because Fiona Vale didn't fall for anyone. She didn't let people in, didn't give away pieces of herself like spare change, but Victor wasn't asking for anything. That was the problem. She stepped back inside and poured herself a glass of wine. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from her lawyer about the new acquisition in Milan. She didn't open it. The next morning, she called in late for the first time in 3 years. When she arrived at the office, Victor was already there, sorting files by the window. His shirt sleeves were rolled in a way that showed the veins in his forearms, and there was sawdust on his jeans. He looked up when she walked in. "You okay?" "Fine," she said, brushing past him. He followed her into her office. "You don't look fine." She turned, biting back the wave rising in her chest. "What do you want me to say, Victor? That I haven't slept in 2 nights? That every time I look at you, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't survive?" His gaze didn't shift. "Then fall. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me." She laughed once, bitter and low. "You think this is a fairy tale, you and me? We don't belong in the same sentence. I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking for right now." She stared at him. Then she stepped forward, took his face in her hands, and kissed him. It wasn't careful, it wasn't polite. It was the kind of kiss that made time stop and logic collapse, and every defense she'd built crack wide open. When she pulled back, he didn't speak. He just looked at her like she'd handed him the sun. She stepped away before she could change her mind. "I need to know something, anything. If I tell you who I really am, what I've done, what I own, will you still look at me like this? You mean like you're the only person in the room who matters?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." He closed the distance between them again. "Try me." She walked to the window and faced the skyline. "I'm not just managing firms, I own them. I built a software platform when I was 23, sold it for 30 million, invested it, grew it. I've been on the cover of business magazines. I have more properties than I can visit in a year. The foundation, that's mine. The car's mine. I'm not some assistant hiring out of desperation. I'm a woman who saw your name on a resume," and she stopped. He stepped up behind her. "Say it. I remembered you from college. You were the only one who didn't treat me like I was invisible." He touched her shoulder. "I remember you too." She turned, startled. "I didn't forget you, Fiona. I just figured you forgot me." "I never did." His hand cupped her cheek. "Then let's stop pretending." She leaned into his touch, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared." "So am I." She looked up at him. "What about Zayla?" "She already likes you, probably more than me." Fiona gave a shaky laugh. "She's got good taste." He kissed her again, slower this time. With the kind of certainty that came from knowing you'd just stepped into something you'd never be able to walk away from. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "What happens now?" she asked. "I think," he said, "now we figure out what it means to build something that lasts." Neither of them said more. They didn't have to. Zayla's voice echoed through the workshop as she skipped between the long workbenches, her ballet flats tapping lightly against the concrete floor. "Daddy, miss. Fiona says the giraffe chair looks like it belongs in a princess castle." Victor looked up from the sandpaper in his hand, grinning as he wiped his brow. "That's a high compliment. Maybe I should ask her if she wants to open a furniture castle with me." Fiona appeared in the doorway then, her heels clicking once before she stepped out of them and walked in barefoot, her toes brushing sawdust. She carried a small paper bag in one hand. Zayla rushed to her. "Did you bring them?" Fiona knelt and handed her the bag. "Still warm." The girl squealed, tore it open, and pulled out 2 cinnamon rolls nearly the size of her head before darting toward the corner to sit on the cushioned bench Victor had built just for her. Victor watched Fiona as she stood again, brushing her hands off on the sides of her navy pants. "You tracked down the bakery she likes. It took calling 3 places. One of them doesn't even speak English, but I got them." He set down the sandpaper. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He crossed the room, his expression careful but open. "You've been doing a lot of that lately." "Doing what?" "Wanting to." He paused. "With me, with her." Fiona looked toward Zayla, who was humming softly as she devoured her treat. "She's easy to want things for." "And me?" Fiona met his eyes. "You're harder." The corner of his mouth tugged. "That sounds about right." "But not impossible," she added. His smile faded into something more sincere. "I don't know how to be with someone like you. You mean someone who owns a dozen buildings and can't cook rice without burning it. I mean someone whose world is bigger than anything I've ever imagined. She moved closer. You're already standing in it. He reached for her hand. I don't want Zayla to get confused. She's already asking if you're going to be at the next school show. I'll be there. I know, he said quietly. That's what scares me. Fiona didn't try to reassure him. Instead, she stepped in and pressed her forehead gently against his. Then let's stop trying to name it. Let's just live it. Later that week, the gallery Fiona had mentioned months before held its spring showcase. Victor had submitted one piece, a handcrafted bench shaped like a sleeping lion, its back arched and smooth, carved with wildflowers that twined along its legs. He hadn't expected it to sell. It did. Within the first hour. Fiona stood beside him as the buyer, a designer from New York, praised his attention to detail and asked if he took commissions. After the man walked away, Victor turned to her. You did this. No, she said. You did. He glanced around at the crowd, the string lights casting golden halos against the walls. I haven't worn a blazer in years. You make it work. He looked down at her. You're not afraid what people will think about you and me. She faced him fully. Victor, I've spent my life shaping how people see me. I'm done with that. Let them think whatever they want. I know what I have. He reached for her waist, careful and certain. What do you have? A man who gives more than he takes. A daughter who sees the world in colors I forgot existed. And a reason to stop chasing more. That night, they returned to the workshop, Zayla asleep in the backseat of Fiona's car. Victor carried her inside, settled her on the cot they'd set up in the corner with her favorite purple blanket, and kissed her forehead. Fiona leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him. You're good at that. At what? Being steady. He pulled the blanket higher over Zayla's shoulder. It's the only thing I ever wanted to be. She walked toward him slowly. Do you want this, all of it? Me, the mess, the life that doesn't always make sense. He took her hand. I want the mornings when you forget your shoes and we laugh instead of fix it. I want the days Zayla tells me your ideas are better than mine. I want the nights when we're too tired to talk but still fall asleep connected. That's what I want. She laced her fingers through his. Then take it. The next morning, Fiona didn't go into the office. She made pancakes, terribly burnt ones that Zayla insisted were still delicious, and watched as Victor helped her daughter glue feathers to a school art project in the workshop's sunlit corner. By afternoon, they stood in the middle of the newly cleared space behind the studio. Fiona turned to Victor, holding out a rolled blueprint. He opened it slowly. What's this? An expansion, a showroom for your work, a place for clients to come see what you do. He blinked. You already designed it. I had help, but yes. He stared at her. Are you sure? I told you, she said. I invest in what matters. He set the paper aside and pulled her close. And what if I told you I want more than a showroom? She smiled. Then ask for it. I want a home for the three of us. One with space for sawdust and cinnamon rolls and giraffe chairs. One where Zayla can paint the walls and you can forget your phone for a whole afternoon. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, yes, he paused. You didn't let me ask. I didn't have to. That weekend, they moved into a quiet house at the edge of the city, nestled between old trees and a winding road. It wasn't massive, but it had a wraparound porch, a built-in bookshelf, and a backyard with enough space for Zayla to plant every flower she could name. Victor hung wind chimes from the porch. Fiona filled the fridge with groceries she didn't know how to cook. Zayla named each room after an animal: Lion's Den, Koala Cove, Dolphin Hall. Their life didn't become perfect, but it became real. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. Victor sat cross-legged on the living room floor, carefully tightening the last bolt on a custom bookshelf he'd been building for weeks. The wood was walnut, the finish smooth and warm. Across from him, Fiona sat curled on the sofa with a folder in her lap, glasses perched low on her nose as she reviewed zoning permits for the showroom expansion. Zayla had fallen asleep an hour ago, curled up in her blanket fort in the corner. You've been quiet for 30 minutes, she said softly, eyes still on the papers. I didn't want to wake her. She sleeps through hurricanes, Fiona said, setting the folder aside. You could have started a marching band and she wouldn't have stirred. Victor looked over at her. You're wearing my hoodie again. She tugged the sleeve over her hand. It smells like cedar and paint. It's comforting. He leaned back on his hands. You know, I used to think comfort was dangerous. Fiona raised an eyebrow. Why? Because it meant I might stay too long, might get used to it. And back then, staying too long in any one place usually meant something fell apart. She pulled her legs underneath her. And now, he looked around the room. The half-finished painting Zayla had started on the wall. Fiona's laptop opened beside a stack of design catalogs. The soft sound of the wind chimes he'd hung weeks ago. Now I don't want to leave. She didn't answer right away. Then I'm applying for guardianship. He looked up, confused. Of who? Of Zayla. I talked to a family attorney. I wanted to surprise you. Victor stared at her. Why would you? You've trusted me with her. Every day, you let her rely on me. I want it to mean something, not just for now, but always. He stood slowly, crossed the room, and stopped in front of her. You want to be her mother? Yes, not just in what I do, but legally. Permanently? He dropped to his knees in front of her, cupped her face in his hands. She already calls you that when she talks about you to her dolls. Fiona's eyes glistened. Really? He nodded. She says you're the one who teaches her how to be brave. She teaches me too. Victor pressed his lips to her forehead. You didn't have to do that, but it means everything that you did. She leaned into him, whispering, I want every piece of this life. Not just the parts that are easy. I'll give you every one of them. Later that week, the city approved the final permits for the showroom. Fiona organized a launch event, but insisted on keeping it small. Invitations were handwritten. Every guest had supported Victor's work in some way: clients, gallery owners, even Zayla's art teacher, who'd once lent them a box of watercolors when Victor forgot to pack hers for the day program. The night of the opening, the showroom buzzed with quiet excitement. Soft jazz played from speakers tucked behind planters. Victor's pieces sat beneath spotlight sculptural chairs, intricate tables, and commissions already marked as sold. Fiona wore a midnight blue dress with a single silver clasp at the shoulder. Victor couldn't stop looking at her, even as he answered questions from buyers and explained joinery techniques to a curious architect. When the crowd had thinned, she walked to him, 2 glasses of sparkling cider in hand. To everything we didn't know we needed, she said, lifting hers. He clinked his glass to hers, and everything we're building now. They stood for a moment in the middle of the room, surrounded by the evidence of their journey. He took her hand, fingers threading naturally together. There's something I want to ask you, he said. She looked up at him. Now? Yes, right here, surrounded by all the things we made happen. Fiona's breath caught. Victor pulled a small velvet box from his back pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single round diamond set in a carved wooden band. The wood matched the first chair he ever made in the studio. I've loved you since before I knew I did, and I love you more every time I watch you laugh with Zayla or fix something before I even realize it's broken. I want a life where we keep showing up for each other, even on the hard days. Especially then. Will you marry me? Fiona didn't hesitate. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him like everything in her life had led to this. A month later, they married beneath the trees behind the studio. Zayla walked Fiona down the aisle, holding both their hands, wearing a crown of wildflowers and a grin so wide it made Victor's chest ache. The ceremony was small, just family, close friends, and the few people who had helped stitch their world together. Fiona's sister flew in from London and cried through the entire vow exchange. Victor's former neighbor, who once babysat Zayla when he had a job interview, brought homemade peach pie for the reception. After the cake was cut and the sun dipped below the trees, Fiona pulled Victor onto the dance floor. They swayed slowly beneath strings of lights, Zayla curled up nearby in a hammock beside Fiona's sister, already asleep. You're not wearing shoes again, Victor murmured. I didn't want to be taller than you in the pictures, he laughed softly. You're always taller than me in every way that matters. She rested her head on his shoulder. You know what I've realized? What? I used to think love was about falling, but it's not. It's about choosing. Over and over again, every day, he kissed the top of her head. Then I choose you. Always. They danced until the music faded and the stars burned bright above them. Years later, a plaque hung outside the showroom's front door. Evans and Vale designs built with heart. Inside, sketches lined the walls, each one signed by Victor, and later by Zayla, whose own pieces became more ambitious with every season. Fiona ran the business side with precision and grace, but always made time to bring cinnamon rolls on Sundays and ask impossible questions that led to better ideas. Their home never grew bigger, but it grew fuller with laughter, with chaos, with mornings that started too early and nights that ended with music playing low in the kitchen, and in all of it, they stayed together. Always.